You ever feel like an idiot, Michael? Probably not as much as I do, but
yeah, there are definitely times where I'm like, oh, I missed it.
I don't know how this happens, but you have an Apple Watch, I see?
I have an Apple Watch, yeah.
I have an Apple Watch. You'll notice, well, you might notice that I'm like, if you were to go on my Apple Watch, I'm like locked out for like 25 minutes because I can't remember my passcode. And it's like I do it every day.
Does it not open automatically when you open up your phone? You don't have it linked to your phone?
It is linked to my phone. It's a different, and the confusing is a different passcode to my phone. Maybe there's something I can do to connect it even more. Like it's connected to Bluetooth. Doesn't need to be connected in a different way. Like I get like my steps and all of that goes back and forth.
Yeah, you should be able to go to, we'll do a little tech support online. Do you have the watch?
I do.
The watch app?
Yes.
So underneath general, you should be able to let it, you could search in there and have it say unlock with unlocking your phone so that they're synced. So it will unlock as soon as you unlock your phone.
This might be the fix here if I can find.
So do you still not know it, or
I don't know it. I've been going through and my passwords are not how should we say robust for my watch, and I'm just going through the options. It could be I'm like my 10th iteration.
You don't have it as the same as your phone?
No, they're on different like cycles. I probably could sync them up, and I do it every day. I just don't know it anymore. Like I just woke up one day and I can't.
So do you have to so you use your work phone?
Yeah,
so
that's
you
why
have to change it periodically.
It forces me to.
Yeah, I have a work phone and my work phone password is a full on password that you would type into for my phone. It's nice. Like you see me try to open up my work phone, and I'm entering capital letters, special numbers, lower. It's all that fun.
I will. Maybe I'll get with you one of these days and see if I can find the way to make this happen, because I keep trying. It's like locked out for 30 more minutes. It's like 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and it just I'm going through the.
Is it? You should be able to go either on this phone.
Yeah. So it is unlock with iPhone. Yeah. Is already on.
You have your other phone, right? Your personal phone.
I do. Maybe I can try that. Yeah.
It's just joined to your Apple ID account, so that you should be able to go into Find My iPhone on either on this phone or your other phone, and find your watch and like unlock it or like reset the password. You should. These would be steps I would be pursuing.
Yeah. So from here, I just can't do it on this phone, is what you're saying?
Yeah, you should be able to lock that phone and then unlock it.
Yeah, because it says, you see that's on. That's been on. I did not just turn this on.
Or you can just change the passcode right there.
Let's see. I will see if it'll let me couldn't change passcode.
Huh.
And it's saying Apple Watch is busy at the moment, but you can try when it's done with its current task. What are you doing? Maybe I just have to wait for that timer.
Right now, it's probably the timer. And if it doesn't work on, both of those phones have your same Apple ID on them.
Correct.
Yeah. Shouldn't matter. Yeah.
So maybe I'll see what we can do.
So if you are an Apple Watch guru, you need some tech support for Zach here.
Because I Googled this, and this is just like a random form. This is not like Apple's website. They're basically like, oh, you need to factory reset your watch, and it'll work. But they said they were saying, at this point, I cannot go through my phone. But this was just like a Reddit form. It was not
once it gets
maybe
timed out, that won't work anymore.
Maybe that's what it is. But they're like, oh, you have to like just factory reset everything. So I'm trying to avoid that. But
it should still, if you factory reset it and then join it with your same,
I could reload it up. That would be a big deal.
These are all things that Google knows that we should search out.
Hey, but it's fun to talk
and
about
you have a 3D printer, right?
I do.
Yeah. And is that working yet?
I need to do the SD card thing. I have not had time. I have had time to do it. I just haven't taken the time to do it. So, it's on my to-do list.
Yeah. Last week we talked about Second Christmas.
Oh yeah. How was Second Christmas?
It was good. We got Chloe this mirror, and it was the one that she asked for, and it lights up. And the packaging was a little bit, it had seen better days. But it never occurred to me.
The mirror was broken.
The mirror itself was not broken, but the backing off of it, like the thing that supports it that would go on the wall, was bent and had come off. And Because it's second Christmas, we were like 2 days past our return date. But I'm going to contact Amazon. I have to do this about once a year and be like, hey, I'm a loyal customer. Look at my account. You get lots of money from me. I don't know if they get lots of money. Probably more money from other people than me.
Yeah.
But, can you help a brother out?
At least the mirror wasn't broken. How old's Chloe? That'd been 7 more years of bad luck. That's a bad way to be in your 20s.
Yeah. And if they won't take it back, it won't be the end of the day because I don't think it'll be that hard to get something from Lowe's and just cut it out and
make
fix
it happen.
So,
I heard this is, maybe I saw this in news, maybe I did. Maybe I saw this on social media. I heard, UPS and Amazon did not renew a contract.
Oh.
They lost, I heard their share. this could be totally false, but UPS's stock dropped drastically.
Whoa.
But people were also saying UPS had that contract. It was such a discount because what are you going to do? It's it was like their drivers, wherever they make so much they couldn't hire enough drivers.
Right.
All their drivers had so much overtime. It was not profitable.
Right.
So they just dropped that. It seems like a big contract to not be able to figure out. And I think they maybe were Amazon's going to figure this out anyway.
Yeah, they were. I mean, at least for our area, if you're getting something in rural Arkansas, UPS is making those deliveries. But if you're getting something here, it's rare that we get something other than straight from the Amazon delivery folks. FedEx is not.
I know, and
FedEx is worse than UPS. Sorry, FedEx.
Yeah, you're offending my whole hometown. That's the one big
in Memphis.
Memphis. Basically, Memphis had FedEx International Paper's taken a hard hit over the years.
Yeah.
As well, it's not a. And what else is in Memphis? I don't know what else is headquartered there, but those are everyone.
Grizzlies.
The Grizzlies
were.
That's true. Grizzlies, yeah. Bald Knob. What's the big industry in Bald Knob?
Well, it's probably pipelining, which is not that's what a lot of people do. So you go out, you pipeline, and then you come back, and then factory, education, farming.
Okay.
I don't know that there's a single big industry in Bald Knob. Searcy nearby, there's some factories there. So.
You probably know this. You know who the largest farm land owner in the United States is?
Bill Gates. Yeah.
So crazy.
Makes a lot of sense, right?
It's insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. Wow. Well, we brought it back to Bill Gates. Started with the Apple Watch, I know, and we went Microsoft at the end. So we're trying
to go all the way around. I think what you're trying to say is, you're trying to say that, man, life is meaningless sometimes.
There's nothing new under the sun. It's all, whatever. Everyone's done it. So we are in the next iteration or the next lesson in this wisdom series, and we're tackling the fun book of Ecclesiastes. So let's go ahead and take it to the next level. From the heart of the Low Country in South Carolina,
it's the Take Two podcast, where we take theology to the next level.
Proverbs is fun. I think generally.
I don't know that I would say fun, but it's at least what you would expect. It's like, hey, this makes sense. Right. If you want to be wealthy, maybe pay attention to your herds. If you sleep all day and you go to the cup, maybe you're going to be lazy and poor.
And we talked about this extensively too. A lot of people do the Proverbs a day. Have you met anyone that does the Ecclesiastes chapter a day? You're just not going to hang out there. Yeah. If I met that person, I'd have a lot of questions.
Oh, man.
They're probably better for it.
What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Don't you want me to read the Bible? Well, yes, but...
And so, Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, all about patterns, all about these principles. Not absolute universal promises, but we shift to Ecclesiastes because, like Proverbs, it's a wisdom book.
Yeah.
Bit more reflective, a little bit harder to read, I think, just with the subject matter. But I think there is a lot of practical wisdom, maybe not in the same way, but it's immensely pragmatic, I think.
I do, and I think it takes a little bit of reading through to understand it. I remember being in my college philosophy class, and this was... oh man, I could probably remember his name. I can see his face. But he was the guy that was like, let's talk about God.
Nice.
When he came in. Professor Endicott. Last I heard, he was at Virginia Tech, somewhere over in Virginia. And he was like, the Bible itself says that life is meaningless. I'm like, and he's like, that's what Ecclesiastes says. There's no meaning in life. And so you Christians can say there's meaning in life, but there's no meaning.
Checkmate. Yeah, Checkmate. He was like, gotcha in your own book. Well, as we go through these books, one of my goals in this Sunday school class we're going through is just pick a word or two that pairs with it. And so Proverbs, I picked patterns. I could have picked principles. I know you were bringing that up.
Yeah.
For Ecclesiastes, I like the word paradox. I'm trying to keep with this theme with the P's.
Mm-hmm. What was it for Psalms?
Psalms, I'm not counting as was. I have nothing for Psalms. Okay. We're starting. Don't do that.
All right. We'll figure something
Maybe
out.
I can retrofit something there where, like we said, Proverbs reveals how things should work. Mm-hmm. Ecclesiastes a lot of times maybe shows some exceptions to the rules where things don't always work out, and it's almost like you look at Ecclesiastes and Job, and you might say, "I've done Proverbs. I've worked hard. I've had integrity. I've done what I'm supposed to do, but I'm looking at life." And it's not. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I did. I don't expect this.
Yeah, and I think you could even take it a step further. Maybe I conquered everything. I've got everything, and I'm still going to die at the end of the day.
Yeah.
This guy who did nothing, I got the same fate as him.
He might even swoop in and get all your hard work.
That's right.
That is depressing. I actually did the work. So I think. Good way to think about it. And we kind of teased this a little bit in the past, looking at the authorship. I think traditionally, most people, Jewish and Christian, are going to say Solomon wrote it. And I think there's good reason. I'm not saying Solomon didn't write it. It's just weird.
It's not a slam dunk.
And I don't think it's integral to interpreting the book.
Half court.
yeah. It's like a 12-foot baseline jumper. But it's like... it'd be nice if they were just like, hey, let's just say Solomon because Proverbs says Solomon. Mm-hmm. Song of Solomon says Solomon. Yeah. Why don't we just say Solomon here? Though maybe you can draw some comparisons between the Kohelet and Solomon.
Yeah, I think that when I looked into this, there were some questions about authorship, but it was like, I think it's a reasonable assumption.
Yeah, and church history, I think, is all over that. It's not even Justin Martyr thought something else. It's everyone's probably so.
And I wonder if maybe he was speaking and someone wrote it down, so it was maybe composed slightly different or something that kind of gives rise to the way it's written. I don't know. Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. Do you know? Well, let's talk about what this title, the Kohelet, because it's confusing. We read about the Kohelet in Hebrew. We read about this Greek transliteration, Ecclesiastes. There's a lot of big words going on. Why are we saying these crazy words? Right. So do I know it? I think I've always the teacher. Yeah, that's how everyone translates it, or preacher, teacher. And when I was reading into it, a lot of the commentaries I was reading, they don't like saying teacher or preacher. I don't know if it's a snobby thing, but they're we like to say the Kohelet. Because we don't know, they're we think, we don't really even know what Kohelet means. We know it probably means to assemble or to gather, but it could mean not gathering people. Maybe it means gathering wise sayings. But you could still say that's maybe a teacher that does that. Right. Yeah. Versus a preacher. They're and maybe it's just a, prejudice. Do they at least give a note to say why? The ones to the reader, the ones I was reading, in the commentaries, they were we'll just refer to them as the Kohelet. The commentaries, but not the they're not translating. It's just commentary. Gotcha, they're just they always refer to it as the Kohelet says this, the Kohelet says that, versus saying the preacher or the teacher because they're smart. But you see that a lot. So I think that if you want to sound smart, just talk about that Kohelet. And part of it is does Kohelet work in Scrabble? Because it doesn't have a U after the Q. You know what I'm saying? That's a cheat code. Think about it. Yeah. Up your Scrabble game. Hey, come here for more Scrabble tips. And part of it is, I think in Hebrew literature, we don't have Kohelet. Might not be a word that's used all the time, this title, but we do have some Kohelets in the Old Testament. It's a short list. The first one is Moses. Next one, I think, is David, Solomon. So this word is used of them in Old Testament scripture? Yes. Okay. As one who's assembling. And normally it is people because it's a king or Moses or something. So I think that's preacher, teacher is a good
a good way to go. But they're all royal if you count Moses as a king of sorts. You got Moses, and you have David, Solomon, Rehoboam, Asa, Hezekiah, and Jehoshaphat. And that's it.
Okay.
So I think just even by
all good kings except for Rehoboam.
Basically. Yeah. And so I think because of that too, I think that lends a little more credibility to Solomon being in that ballpark, because it's not just some like random guy, but even some conservative commentators will say it might not be Solomon, but maybe it's like based on Solomonic.
Rehoboam. I tell you that much. It is not Rehoboam. So who else could it be? Let's go down the list.
So I think the conservative people would say maybe it's written on a Solomonic persona, where it's like maybe this was compiled 500 years after Sol, or maybe 300 years after, and it's like a mixture of, some of this is king, some of this is Solomon, some of this is not. And their big pushback is we don't want to artificially impose something on the text where it doesn't say Solomon, and we read into it someone who is backslidden and turned their back on God, when it seems like they fear God a lot in this. And that's like their justification.
Is it about 350 years between Solomon and Daniel? Is that about right? Because David's
sounds about
right at
something
1,000,
like that.
Solomon's right
Correct.
at 1,000.
Yeah.
I mean, Daniel's the only other person I go, this is in his wheelhouse.
Yeah, that's true.
But I don't. It seems Solomon to me.
So, and some of those people that do not like Solomon, believe this or not, there are commentators out there that are like, we take the optimistic view on Solomon. It's not really an optimistic view. It's still it's more realist, but they're like, we're not as down on this book or as negative. We're more like, it doesn't seem like someone who was apostate wrote this. Maybe it was someone who had experienced a lot of things and was like, fearing God's good is kind of like, I think, where they try to land on it. But
and I guess thinking about it, Daniel does not fit, because this guy says, I tried to get pleasure through wine. I tried to get pleasure through women. That doesn't really fit Daniel's life.
It was in between that Daniel one, and he was like sneaking in some of this stuff. Yeah, that does not fit.
But guess what? It does fit Solomon's life.
It does fit Solomon's life. If you're reading Ecclesiastes, something else to keep in mind. You can think about this two ways. Maybe it's the author and using different literary devices, or it's two different voices speaking. Whether it's two people or one person using a literary technique, you've got this narrator who kind of introduces the Kohelet, his overall message. Then at the end, we'll kind of get that last word, evaluate. And then the bulk of it in the middle is this guy just exploring everything in life.
So could be, who's the guy that's with Nehemiah? Starts with the E.
Ezra?
Yeah. Maybe Ezra wrote the bookends. I'm getting creative here. And we're just, I have zero scholarship or textual support for this. But
most of everything I read was like, if you were, the people I read that were actually conservative that I would think held a high view of Scripture were either saying it's Solomon or it's a Solomonic persona that was probably based on Solomon, but maybe also based on a couple other things. Everyone else I read was either like...
Maybe someone who was like a counselor to Solomon and witnessed his life. And
something
was
like that.
Hey, I want to tell you the story, but they did it in first person.
And they did something weird like that. Everyone else I read was just like liberal, and they're like, Solomon definitely couldn't have wrote it because none of the real people actually wrote it. Or,
Well, that's because they don't believe anyone.
That's what I mean. They have And either way you land, I think it's good to think Solomon, but it's not like you're saying Paul. I don't think Paul wrote Romans, because that's a different thing.
Right.
Like that authorship's importance.
Right.
I mean, this is important too, but that's So anyway, little overview. I think a good way to study Ecclesiastes. You mentioned this in your sermon, whenever that was. There's a lot of stock phrases, a lot of themes, like a lot of things that repeat itself throughout the book. That if you have time, it might be worth your while to study these phrases and see how they relate. Things like hevel, and you mentioned under the sun, under heaven. You got this word, maybe gain or profit or surplus or whatever you're thinking. Time, inevitability of death. There's a lot of these things that just seem to man.
The Beatles hung out here for a while, right? Was it them that sang "There's a season, turn, turn, turn"?
I don't know.
I think that's the Beatles.
My Beatles knowledge is not good, but we're gonna. This is a podcast where we fact check. Michael's fact checking, so we can know. So a lot of different phrases you could study to understand this book a little bit better. Oh, were you right?
The birds.
The birds.
The birds.
Man. One of these major themes that if you're going to pick one and just hang out on one, probably should hang out on Hevel.
Yeah. Hevel is, I mean, like I said, I said that in the podcast, right? Not pre-podcast banter, but when I was a teenager, our pastor spent a lot of time in Proverbs, and then we went to Ecclesiastes, and he opened up every sermon on Ecclesiastes with vanity of vanity. It's all vanity. And that's our word, Hevel.
Because you're hitting it a lot. In Ecclesiastes 12 chapters, this is mentioned like 38 times. It's mentioned like in the second verse, and it's like in the last verse of what the Kohelet says. So if you're missing that, you're probably missing out on a lot. And it's one of those things that I think as you read Ecclesiastes, it basically means the same thing, but there's different shades and nuances you can pull out.
So it could be like a place where you get ready in the morning with lights, like a vanity.
Yeah, that's the problem. If you're like, what does this mean? Does this mean vanity in that way? And you're like, well, vain people maybe use vanities a lot. So you can see like the connection.
Yeah.
Other translations.
That's the Mott translation. It's probably not the best.
That's great. KJV, NASB, ESV all do the vanity of vanities. NIV goes with meaningless. Just really gets it out there. Life is meaningless. CSB does absolute futility. And I think all those translations, I think they do a good job of trying to capture. I'm not like this translation's terrible.
Right. And I think the root word means mist or vapor, right?
Mist, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that you can think it's here today, gone. It's meaningless. It has no lasting impression. It's like when it's cold outside, you blow your breath out, and it just kind of it's gone.
It's gone. No, I think that's really good. And what I did in the Sunday school class is go through a couple different passages of Ecclesiastes and tried to nail down. You want to pull out the old Bible here, and saw maybe a few different nuances on this Hevel that the author, the Kohelet, tries to give us. And I think if you understand some of those shades, it gives you still know what it's talking about, but it gives you maybe a more robust understanding of this. So if you want to turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 6 and look at verse 12, read that for us.
It says, "For who knows what is good for a man during his lifetime? During the few years of his futile life, he will spend them like a shadow. For who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun?"
Good example. Few days, it's kind of like a shadow. And I think you're right. I think that means meaningless, but more than meaningless here is talking about that fleetingness, that it's here today, gone tomorrow. Life is transience. If you want to turn to Ecclesiastes 2, verse 11, I'll just skip to the next one. This is what we see this type of use a lot, and this is what the translators are after with futility or vanity or whatever. But go ahead and read this one.
It says, "Thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after wind, and there was no profit under the sun."
And here you kind of see that more, that some of this effort is vain. It probably feels meaningless or hopeless. Doesn't necessarily mean that it happened really fast. Probably more so on the meaningless side. But you can kind of see how these are all connected.
But in the big scheme of things,
that's right. It's
still fast. Like
it's still you're right. Still very, very quick. And when you see it used this way, a lot of times it's paired with that phrase, chasing after the wind or striving after wind or whatever. And then the last type I will point out. Let's go to Ecclesiastes 8:14.
Yeah. "There is futility which is done on the earth. That is, there are righteous men to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked. On the other hand, there are evil men to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I say that this too is futility."
That's good. And read one more for us. If you want to go to Ecclesiastes 4. No, sorry. Let's see if this is our place. Actually, let's go to Ecclesiastes 2 and look at verse 26.
Yeah. "For to a person who is good in his sight, he is given wisdom and knowledge and joy, while to the sinner he is given the task of gathering and collecting, so that he may give to the one who is good in God's sight. This too is vanity and striving after wind."
Yeah, I should have pulled up the exact verse I wanted here, because I don't know if that was the exact one I was looking at, but some of this is, I think you see it in the 8:14 one, for sure, where like things that should happen to the wicked happen to the righteous, and the righteous to the wicked. And it's almost like, this is where I get my word paradox, where it is meaningless, but it almost like doesn't make sense. And not only does it make sense, a lot of times they'll pair things like it's a grievous evil. Like this not only does it make sense, but it's a frustrating evil.
I think that may be the opening of chapter 4.
Maybe this is where I was looking for.
Because it says, then I looked again at all the acts of oppression which were being done under the sun, and behold, I saw the tears of the oppressed, that they had no one to comfort them, and on the side of their oppressors was power, but they had no one to comfort them. So I congratulated the dead who are already dead more than the living who are still living. But better off than both is the one who has never existed, who has never seen the evil that is actually done under the sun.
Yeah, some of that stuff you read, you're like, man,
wow.
It is just totally insane. Where there's this heaviness, this vanity, or this vanity, this meaninglessness that. Sure, dude, this is something I'm stealing from Bible Project. I don't know if this is taking it too far or not, but they kind of run with this mist vapor idea. This is what they say, that it also is used of like smoke, which you can see that's not a super big jump, or maybe it's not the same as like a mist or vapor, but it's one of those things you see a cloud of smoke and you're like, that's a thing. Like I could grab onto that, and like you can't grab onto it. Like it's like not there, but it seems like it's there. It's like.
It's like when you're a kid, you think you could like walk on a cloud.
That's a great example. You're like, this is a fluffy mattress.
Right. Yeah, because it was someone, maybe it was Phoebe recently, was like, I wonder, we were driving through fog, and we were talking about clouds. Like, I wonder what it would look like to be inside a cloud. Like, you're kind of in one right now. This is what it looks like. This
is, You're like, it's not what you think it would be. And that can leave, frustration where you're like, man, this is all that there is to life. And so essentially this Kohelet, he's going to explore life. He's going to attempt to find a solution to this dilemma of Hevel. And he goes and goes and goes and really doesn't find a theological solution. He's just kind of left with, that's a reality of life. This is the fallen world. There is Hevel.
Yeah, and I think there are a few phrases, and it's not like really clear, where he kind of peaks above under the sun, and you'll see these like breaks of like, oh, but I'm going to depend on God. And I'd have to go search that out. But it's not like it's super clear. But that was how I was taught to view this book. Like, hey, this is the view of humanity in our world if there is no afterlife, if there is no God, if there's nothing to kind of redeem what we're going through.
Yeah, this is a reality. And it can be just, this is all you got. It's a bad place to be. In our Sunday school class, John and Jess Petters shared a few things. They were talking about just recently in their life, the last handful of years, they've had a lot of people pass away in their family, and just like 7 in 4 years. Whew, that's insane.
It is.
And just the challenges that go with that. Life is. It's like you're young, you don't pay attention to that as much, and then as you get older. I had someone come up to me afterwards and was just like, man, you just see so much more clearly as you get older because things become a lot less enticing. And it's like, man, I've lived this. It's like, man, it can let you down, where I think the more you're around, like Ecclesiastes says, if you're in the house of mourning, that's a good place to be because it gives you some perspective. Yeah.
And I appreciated where Jessica ended. And she ended outside of Ecclesiastes, but she ended in 2 Corinthians 4. And these are some of my favorite verses. So, but 2 Corinthians 4, towards the end of that chapter, this is Paul. And he's talking about, all that they go through. If you read, it's a good read. So listener, go read 2 Corinthians chapter 4, because it has those verses about being jars of clay and being used in spite of that. And then all that they suffer for the gospel's sake. And then he concludes by saying, for momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond comparison, while we look not at all the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. I think I threw an extra word great. All in there, but read it yourself. Be a Berean and check it out yourself. So.
That's right. No, I think that's great. And when I closed out this class, I was just thinking about, man, what are your expectations on life? Because I feel like I know it's been around for forever, but I feel like in the last 10 or 20 years, you just hear about people deconstructing all the time. I don't feel like I hear quite as much now. There's like maybe it was over COVID. It was like every other article I read was like, so-and-so deconstructs their faith. Everyone's deconstructing their faith. Yeah. And, I read these accounts of people, grew up in the church, and part of me is like, maybe their expectations were not in the right spot, where they looked at Scripture and they found a lot of problems where they felt like, God wasn't holding up his end of the bargain. And
or they didn't get. I think there are a lot of Christian communities where, and this is going to be the apologist in me that comes out, where people ask questions, or even if they don't ask the question, they're in an environment where they already know it's not okay to ask questions.
We won't take it seriously.
We're not. All I'm going to tell you is that you believe. Like, don't try to outsmart God. Don't try to outthink God.
Yeah.
This is what it says, and just believe it. And I think
that's a problem.
That is the problem. Because we all have questions, and our biggest enemy is ourself. Our biggest critic can be ourself. And if I can take a couple more minutes being the apologist. So we get this example of doubting Thomas, where he had doubts, and wow. Don't be Thomas.
Yeah, bad guy.
That's a bad guy. Here's the difference. Thomas had direct eyewitness folks telling him, like, his was an unreasonable unbelief. And so Jesus doesn't say, you should never question anything. Right. He is like, you believe because you saw with your own eyes, Thomas. Blessed are those who are going to have to believe without seeing this with their own eyes. And John, right after that, says, I wrote all this stuff down so that you could believe, right? So be a person who's open to questions. And when someone has questions, especially if it's your kid or someone that, like, you're an authority over, like someone in your classroom, especially if it's like a challenging question, or if they're like, man, I sometimes don't know if God exists, or how can I trust this? You should thank them for coming to you with that question, because they have demonstrated trust in you, and now help them work through that. So.
I think that's true, because I think a lot of people feel embarrassed, or they're vulnerable with that, and you can make them feel like, why would you bring that up? Like, never. You're basically saying never.
You
ask
have
that
question. I can't believe that you would have those kind of doubts. Well,
and if you're hearing that as an 8 and 10-year-old and 12-year-old, it's like, good luck. I'm not going to bring that up. That's a really good point. And so you hear a lot about this deconstruction. And the point I was trying to make is, I kind of think that if I'm reading this in a charitable Ecclesiastes, I'm like, man, he's kind of deconstructing his faith. What I like about that is he's kind of looking for life's answers everywhere, but he never says, let's throw away God.
Right.
Like I think he at least realizes that he's the problem, or the things he's trying to find satisfaction is the problem. He's never saying, God is outright, this is the problem. Like, he kind of breaks down his faith in a different way. And even the narrator, like, at the end, is like, man, teacher is wise. This kind of stuff he's saying is good. It's like nails. It's like a goad. Like, it kind of hurts, but it kind of gets you thinking about things rightly. And I stole this quote from Derek Kidner. We mentioned him in Proverbs, writing a commentary, a little commentary on Ecclesiastes. But this deconstruction thing I kind of grabbed from him. He wrote this probably in the 60s. And he's talking about just the pessimistic nature of this book, that it's like kind of challenging. And what he says, he's like, well, this is exactly what the writer intends. He's demolishing to build. The searching questions he's asked are those that life itself puts to us if we'll only listen. He can afford to ask them, because in the final chapters, he has good news for us. Once we can stop pretending that what is mortal is enough for us, who have been given a capacity for the eternal. The function of Ecclesiastes is to bring us to the point where we begin to fear futility of life. And so it is, if everything is dying, we face the appalling inference that nothing has meaning, nothing matters under the sun. It is then that we can hear the good news, that everything matters, for God will bring every deed into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. That is how the book will end. On this rock we can be destroyed, but it's rock, not quicksand. There is a chance to build. That it kind of strips away everything you could find hope in under the sun. It doesn't really give you necessarily, hey, Jesus is here, but it kind of primes you for, like, man, this is not where I should be looking for my ultimate hope in life.
It's like he's helping you see, Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened. And this is pointing out that you should probably be weary and under heavy burdens with life as it is. And so you need to seek another answer to life.
Man, isn't this something like you hear this kind of thing? Not saying like everyone feels this way, but you hear accounts like this all the time of like athletes and people that do have access to presumably everything.
Right.
It's like they're just like, man, not doing it for me. Or you know what I mean? It's like I'm trying to chase this thing. It's like that. I feel like that's a common refrain you hear with, high celebrity status, where it's not like this is just like a Christian book thing. I think we hear this.
Yeah. And to bring up your favorite person, I remember a couple years before he retired, Brady said something very similar. Someone was like, when you retire, he's like, I don't really know. Like my whole life has been pointed at football. And I found meaning in football. And now, I'm looking, and it's going to go away. And I have prayed for, that God would use that to wake him up. Well, I don't know if it's probably not happened yet, but it's that same thing. I'm sure that he has come to that point where he's had to deal with some of these questions, like, the greatest quarterback ever, but what does that really mean in the end? Especially
when someone gets a 3 champion in a row dynasty. Right? Yeah, that's crazy. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I think
we're recording this before, so we don't know.
We could be like, totally missing it. But as hard as Ecclesiastes, and it's like it's good to be in there. You can read that, and I think it on the deconstruction kind of thing kind of prepares you. Like your worldview shouldn't be shattered when money doesn't fulfill or it's like we've talked. To your point, like the Bible talks about this stuff, even if it's like, in a little bit different way. It's not like, this kind of stuff. We can expect that maybe the righteous will suffer sometimes. Yeah. This is not just Ecclesiastes, but you look around and you're like, how did some guy work for all this money and some guy just take it? It's like, that's what happens in a fallen world, unfortunately. That's under the sun.
Yep. All right. I agree. And the more you can get trained up while it's good, the better you're going to withstand it when it's bad.
That's right. Yeah. So, you don't wait. You don't want to be in rock bottom. Yeah. That's a good point.
So hide these truths in your heart. Help center yourself on where the Bible is centered. And then when those storms come,
that's good.
It's not going to be fun, but you're going to be able to weather them.
It's great. Well, I feel like I've hung out in Ecclesiastes enough. Time to move on to Job next week. No.
What one book could be better, less depressing than Job?
Yeah, that's right. Well, we had to spend 2 weeks on Proverbs just to kind of balance it out before we took the punch, because Job is the the great example of someone who could, if he were holding the book of Proverbs, he could say, I'm doing these things. Where am I missing the boat? And I think we'll kind of talk about this more maybe, but all 3 of these books in some way make a big deal about this deed consequential relationship or this retribution principle, and they're all like fixated on it from like a different perspective. And it'll be good to go through Job. You can see all the different characters and see where they think, and we'll get in this downer mode, but
so you're going to do the hard work of patterning out his friends what they have to say.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking to this guy. I don't know if you're familiar with him. I wasn't, but he is very insightful. It's a guy named John Walton. He was a professor at Moody for like 20 years. He's at Wheaton right now for like the last 15. And again, he just knows so much specialized a lot in ancient Near Eastern literature, and he's got some good insights, stealing a lot of what he is for Job. So, next time we will hit up Job. Anything else you would add about Ecclesiastes? Here's your chance before we move on.
I think we're good.
All right, that's our take. Thanks for listening to Take 2. Find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube for those who want to watch our videocast.